All right, 40K enthusiasts, incoming Voxcast from the comments here on my YouTube channel. Fritz going second in 40K. We talk a lot about going first. What are some of the things we should be aware of if we are going second? And I want to approach this question by taking a step back first. This is something as I'm passionate about playing 40K, as I'm putting down my miniatures, as I'm getting ready to grab that cornate glory, to grab that tabletop immortality, I often forget that while first turn is very important in 40K, and we've explored this in some of the other podcasts up on my YouTube channel, the game actually starts before that, with your opponent pulling out their models. What are they going to do? What's the plan behind this list? Are they going for a hero hammer? Are they going for a Death Star? Is it just throwing lots and lots of trash mob models against you? Is it synergy? Are they taking just take Imperial Knights? Are they throwing Knights at you? What's the game plan? And the second aspect is through deployment, whether you're going first or second, and certainly first has more momentum, how can you gain a tactical advantage? How can you put yourself in a position first turn to generate the largest amount of D6 dice? And I go into a lot more detail about this because while it has importance in 40K, this is fundamental to any war game. Battletech, Wings of Glory, Chain of Command, whatever we're going to play, Age of Sigmar. And up on my YouTube channel, I've broken down the various games that I enjoy. There's a general section, a general playlist called Wargaming Tactics. Part 1, 2, and 3 gets into this in a lot more detail. So there should be a couple of things going on. But, the butcher's nails, they blind me. I want that glory. I'm trying to stay focused on that. Going first is important in 40K. We need to understand that because if we find ourselves going second, or if we find ourselves exploring some tactical advantages by going second, what would they be? The reason that going first is so important, well, 3 reasons. 40K is about momentum. You need to leverage the massive maximum amount of leverage immediately, turn 1. Because and momentum means, well, some of us might have enough dice to do this. Playing Khorne, I have enough dice to do this. And then this might be a worthwhile exercise, either to visualize or physically do. Lay out your army, and then in front of each unit, lay out the number of D6 that they generate, either in shooting or in the assault. That is your dice potential for the entire game at whatever level you're playing at. Every turn, that dice potential is going to get less and less and less and less, simply because you're taking losses. Now, out of that dice potential, visually think of what that represents. You're not going to be able to access that every single turn. Are units in range? Where are they on the table in positioning with movement? And even when you do shoot, we have to go through this idea. Assault, same thing. You have to hit, you have to wound, you have to negate saves, and kind of move on from that. So the idea is through momentum, through leveraging the most of your army to get the maximum amount of dice that you possibly can every turn. It's going to get smaller and smaller every turn. So when I throw around momentum as a definition in 40K, that's what I'm suggesting. I used to describe it as aggression, but can you have good aggression? That kind of conveyed jerk mode on, and that wasn't really the best description for it. So let's look about momentum. Turn 1 going first allows you to seize that momentum. The challenge with 40K is it is not a reactive system. It's a you go, I go system. So by the very fact that I get to go before you and move, I get to shoot my toys before you get to shoot your toys, and I force you to remove models before you can react to me, is massive. Now, okay, there's little bits and rules and exceptions here and there. It is a Games Workshop game where you might be able to negate that, fallbacks and things like that. But for the most part, 90%, you sit there while I do my thing, and then I sit there while you do your thing, you sit there while I do my thing on there. So that's why turn 1 is so powerful. This is further compounded by the fact that the standard 40K table size, now yes, you can play on any size, and there's special games and mega games and things like that, but the standard 40K table size, for the scale and the size of the armies that you are throwing down, that we are throwing down. And look, I love big games, right? That's up in the archives also. The table is too small. What this means is turn one, by moving, and we're not even talking about fast-moving armies. The challenge becomes you're at a major disadvantage. I can maneuver my stuff. You're out on the table. There's nowhere really to hide. We're going to talk about terrain for a second. These are the advantages of going first. Now, Games Workshop has accelerated this. And I'm not making a values judgment on here. It's led to some interesting considerations and some interesting concessions. If we look at the original incarnation of 40K, Rogue Trader, it had a lot of quirks. It had a lot of different personality to it, a lot of things that worked and didn't work. But essentially, it was kill team. It was skirmish-based. The Battle for the Farm, iconic 40K battle, was between some Crimson Fist Space Marines and a bunch of orcs. Now, if I say that, what do you think of 40K right now? 100 orcs on the table, maybe 40, 50 Space Marines, some tanks, some flyers, a knight, just because everybody's got a knight on there. Battle for the Farm was, I had the set back in the day. It was like 10 orcs, some Gretchen, and it was something like 7 or 8 Space Marines on there. Well, maybe a little bit more, maybe 20 orcs, 2-to-1 essentially. Not a lot of miniatures, definitely skirmish territory on there. That worked on the size of the 40K gaming table because you had places to hide, places to maneuver, places to outflank. You had tactical decisions. Now that Games Workshop has increased the model count, reducing the points, gets more models on the table. They've introduced what we used to call super heavies, but now you've introduced kind of these models that break the infantry skirmish scale, knights and things like that. Some of the flyers that are introduced. It speeds the game up. It's much easier to close the range. On top of this, and this was a correction from 7th to 8th edition, a lot of complaints about 7th where the games just take too long to play. So Games Workshop mixed up the movement profiles where things are much faster now. You know, pre-8th, it was like everything moves 6 inches. A couple of models, like Raveners, will move the 12 because they're beasts. And vehicles can kind of move regular and shoot, or move flat out twice and not shoot. But that led to a very even-paced game. Things are a lot faster now. So what this leads up to, add to the fact that I believe a lot of the videos that I see online, a lot of the battle reports, this is not taken in a negative way. There's not enough terrain on the table. There's not enough terrain on the table. Absolutely. Go look at some of the historical games and see historicals, World War II and stuff. That's terrain. Now, obviously, if you're playing on a wasteland board, or it's like a World War I-esque trench board, or just a decimated, bombed out, blown up world, then you can have your 2 pieces of terrain and like a broken forest in the center. But most tabletop games, you need that terrain. So coming in from this point of view, what this means is first turn is powerful. First turn is magnified more if you're a shooty-based army, a gun-line type army that's out there. You need first turn. And once you build in the dice redundancy for that, you're going to blast your opponent off the table. We see this with a lot of Alpha Strikey-esque lists. We see this with deployment lockdown lists. There's a lot of variety of lists that are going to try and exploit the fact that turn 1 you can't move. All right, well, I'm taking turn 2. What advantage does it have? I don't want to speak for everybody, whether some of you are still playing random game length or a defined game length, or you're playing till you wipe the opponent off the table. All are interesting ways to play 40K. The advantage of going second is twofold, and then we got to talk about negating that first advantage. By going second, you have the ability to get that last turn, that final push, that final momentum with whatever the victory conditions are for the game. You have a chance to counter or make things up, even if it's turn-by-turn scoring. You get to have kind of the knowledge of where and how your opponent's committed first, because you get to go. Is that enough to counter the massive damage of momentum that they can do? Maybe. Maybe not. These are the considerations. The second aspect is by going second, especially on turn 1, if you're playing an opponent that has momentum, you're going to know their intentions. Because the thing about 40K, I'm going to compare it to Battletech for a moment. I love Battletech. Battletech is a game where there might be victory conditions: get into the base, grab the equipment, get out, recon a certain area, get in, get out, blow up your opponent. There is not a set time limit. We can play 5 turns, 10 turns, 15 turns, 50 turns. So because we're not under that artificial pressure of you go, I go in terms of turns, I can start to advance my mechs forward, my war robots forward, and then if you start to counter, or I'm taking some losses, I can pull back. I could take some fast-moving hover vehicles, send them up the flank as a distraction, and when you react, I can pull them back. I get to dictate the pace of the game. 40K, whatever army you're playing, even if you're not playing a hyper-aggressive army like my Cornate Berserkers of Scalathrax, you don't have time to burn. If your Land Raider is the hammer and the Terminator's inside, I got to play Terminators, I got to play Land Raiders. I'll always be playing them no matter what edition. That's my hammer and anvil. I can't be hanging out turn 1 and 2 doing nothing. I need to be aggressively moving forward, right? I need to be, aggressive, hostile, and mobile, pushing forward into you there. So by going second, turn 1, pre-turn 1 deployment, where we're seeing the units our opponent has, we're seeing what they're pulling out, we're seeing what they're doing, we're getting that narrative. Turn 1, you're going to find out really fast what they're intending to do. They can't afford to wait. So that knowledge gives you some idea to counter. It gives you some ways to slow down their momentum. Those are the advantages of turn 2. Long-term advantages on there. In the current incarnation of 40K, elite armies get hurt a lot. I define elite, that's a definition. I define elite as low model count. I started playing around with elite armies with the previous Grey Knight book, exploring ways to take paladin-type armies and really, let me show up with 20 Terminators, and that's 5,000 points. Okay, well, maybe it was 2,000 points. Actually, no, they were pretty expensive at the time, maybe 3,000 points. And playing an elite army from that way, it was an interesting counter compared to, at the time, my Tyranid spawning army, which it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gaunts. And I would go to a 2 or 3 day 40K event, wake up on Monday to go to work, and I'm like, why? I can't move. I can't move my arms. I can't move my back, because I was leaning over tables, pushing around hundreds of models a turn. Then you blow them up, then I spawn more. So for a while there, I was really pumped. Going to events, especially where I had to travel and pull stuff, I was just there for the social experience. So yeah, I want to try and win, but if I lose, it's okay. We're going to hang out and do some 40K. So let me bring a small super elite army on there. The challenge with playing an elite army today, that's where you get hurt the most, by having someone going first, because if they inflict losses on you with the dice, you don't have enough model mass. You don't have that big enough dice pool, because remember, every turn you're getting weaker and weaker, to push forward on there. So elite armies are harder to play. What I see more and more, if you're not going to really aggressively go for first turn, then you need to, and this is hard, I'm right there blinging up all my guys with war gear, and my Chaos Lord is all decked out and shiny. You need some sort of what I define as trash mob. You need some points of models that are going to go up there first and be that buffer, be that speed bump, be that roadblock. Take those dice wounds. I use that with cultists. Something cheap enough, depending on your codex, that you're willing to lose. Rippers, scarabs, things like that. It needs to be balanced enough based on the level that you're playing at. Just so when you take that beating turn 1, you haven't lost half of your army. You've lost models, but you still have mass on there. That's the idea. Going first, going second.